Well, as we do every other evening on Newsfeed PM, the late edition, we open the platform up to you as well. And we're asking you, what are your thoughts on the outcomes of the National Convention over the past 2 days? Join the conversation by sending us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 or give us a call, 010-594-6010. Let's talk about just how much confidence remains in the work that was done over the past 2 days. Joining us is the Convention Organising Committee's chair, Mr. Delegates. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. An absolute pleasure to have you in studio.
Thank you very much and good evening to your viewers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Also joining us is Blind SA's Vice President, Mr. Thagani Masuka. Yana, which is You Are Not Alone, that foundation's Dineo Sebaka joins us, as well as a member of the National Convention Organising Committee, Anzio, who is also with the Zabalaza Pathways Executive Director. Guys, thank you so much for joining us as well via video link. So I do want to start here in studio with you, Mr. Delegates. Just before we went on air, we were talking about what it must feel like to be on the other side of this convention now. A high pressure, a few weeks for you, one can just imagine. But if we really start to think about how you would characterize the work that was done over the past 2 days, and if you feel that that you were able to really deliver on the mandate for South Africans.
I really believe that the convention delivered and stood up to its objective. We will remember that when others pulled out, we had 7 days to pull off this convention. And a great number of civil society organizations came on board and they saved the day. It truly became a citizen-led process. The spirit which nourished throughout the convention, those who were there and watched, it was very high. And I think many ordinary South Africans, because I always ask South Africans, let us not predetermine. We may have a number of experiences and frustrations. This is an opportunity of a lifetime for South Africa, and especially those whose voice are continuously suppressed. And I can assure the leadership of this process, including the one which is coming, it is their responsibility to protect and nourish this process and ensure that it is truly, truly citizen-led. If you were in that room, it was citizens, not government, which actually saved that day.
I just want to go back to this point that you made around when we saw various foundations pulling out of the convention. 7 days that this organizing committee had to pull off this convention. Just talk to me about some of the logistical nightmares, challenges that you faced, and perhaps, as you say, civil society coming on board and really saving the day, examples of where we saw that particularly taking place.
Remember the previous setup, it has a number of subcommittees, including the preparatory task committee. When the pullout happened, literally we had to reorganize the implementation mechanism. Many civil society organizations came on board. They have to consolidate the methodologies, develop a toolkit in 7 days. They have to redesign the program, follow up into the invitations, and ensuring that the 1,000 commitment that we have made in terms of representation is in that room. The collective, I always say to people who were not there, there were people, and especially the administration staff, made up of the network, government, and civil society. They literally camped at UNISA to make sure that it happened. It was not perfect, but definitely it was authentic.
Well, let's hear from other stakeholders. We also are joined by Anzia Jacob. You were part of the National Dialogue Civil Society Caucus, also a member of this convent or the organizing committee to some extent. Talk to me about the role that you played, Zabalaza Pathways, and how you would characterize the 15th and the 16th of August, how you and South Africans should remember what was done on that 2 days at UNISA.
Thanks for having me. Just a minor correction. I'm not from Zabalaza Pathways, but rather with the Civil Society National Dialogue Caucus.
Okay.
And really, this is an incredible outcome for a process that, as Boichoko points out, has been really marred with controversy. But when you saw how South Africans pulled together and actually stood in process with one another, I mean, think about the fact that Abahlali Basemjondolo and the Afrikaner Bond and traditional leaders were all under the same roof at the same time. This is unprecedented. The nation showed up. You had 1,200 delegates in attendance, if my memory is correct. And that just showed that an oversubscription to process, delegates staying beyond the closing time of the convening, these were the things that were not really seen on screen. There was great interaction, and it was really, I think, a well-showed citizen-led engagement. As Boichoko says, it was imperfect, but it was bound to be so. This is the kickoff process, and it was always going to be something that was going to be hotly contested, but it was important to see such contestation.
Yeah, and so you're saying that there was buy-in, that people were in the room and they were doing the work. Dineo, was this your experience as well? And maybe you can talk to me about the contribution of Yana, You Are Not Alone Foundation.
Thank you so much for giving me the platform to speak. Thank you so much for also inviting me here. Yes, I was indeed part of the delegates that did attend the National Dialogue, and it was indeed a very, I would say, very fruitful. And for a young social activist as I am, I was able to also learn of other things that people are experiencing, and some were able to express themselves, but unfortunately, some of us, we did feel like we didn't get that platform to speak up. But to be given a platform where we are able to discuss all these social ills and concerns that we are having as a country, as citizens, it was very beautiful to witness. But what I wanted to say, or what I'd like to put across, is as nice, as beautiful and as organized as these things can get, what is on the minds of every South African out there is, to what extent will we be holding such dialogues or meetings or round tables where we will be talking of these and just discussing of these things without a proper implementation plan, or at least rather with these themes that are being discussed, whether they be an implementation plan or timeline or time frame of when these issues will actually be dealt with. So that's what we as Yana wanted to actually put across, and would want to also bring across to you guys as well.
Okay, yeah, and I think important concerns that you're raising, we'll get some response as well from Mr. Ditage. But quickly with us as well, Mr. Thakani Masuga, Vice President of Blind SA, was there fair representation of persons with disabilities in South Africa?
Yeah, thank you, Naledi, for the opportunity. Firstly, let me just dispute the utterances by the chairperson of the National Convention to say the convention delivered on its mandate, and as such met the objective with which it was intended to meet. You know, you cannot have a convention that meets its objective if the convention is not inclusive. Firstly, we must say that this convention was not inclusive of the disability sector. We were an afterthought, and we got to be included after fighting. And when we talk about a fair representation, there was supposed to be a fair consultation of the disability sector. Instead, the organizing committee decided to go and elect or nominate 2 individuals in the artist field, with Kutazo, with a lady who won awards in the tennis competition, and the outgoing Miss South Africa, with deaf. They may be competent in such areas, but that does not necessarily mean that they are activists who can champion the interests of persons with disabilities. So we are saying this process must go back, and we must start correctly. Otherwise, it's going to turn into a national distraction instead of a national progress. And to say that this is a citizen-led progress or a program, it's not true. This is a government-led program, because at the first stage, we're not even included to decide, consulted to decide on the topics that must be deliberated at the national convention. We were just co-opted there and discussed the topics which were initiated by government who were not part of the agenda. That's the fact. And we cannot say that this program, this national program, was fair. It was not fair.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. We're going to get responses, of course, from the chair of the Convention Organising Committee, but we're taking your calls as well. Just what you make on what we've gotten on the other side of this national convention that took place over the past 2 days at UNISA in Pretoria. Your calls can come in on 01059461010 or send us a WhatsApp 072-110-5584. Mulantwa is in Kempton Park. Mulantwa, good evening. Thank you so much for calling again.
Good evening, Ausnaledi. Good evening. How are you?
I'm well, Abuti. Thank you for calling. Talk to us.
Naledi, I've got 3 points that I just want to contribute in the subject matter.
Sure.
I'm not entirely dismissive of the national dialogue, but as a South African, I'm frustrated that it seems that the government incompetence and useless leaders, they want to hide behind the national dialogue on terms of their responsibility on a daily basis. I mean, there are matters that I regard them as the low-hanging fruit. That no, they don't need the national dialogue. I mean, the collapse of the municipality in terms of service delivery, the corruption in the country, the crime in the country, the polarized borders in the country, they don't have to wait for a dialogue. Because if that's the case, it means that for the next 12 months, we will not be having a country. Because the government can't act. They'll be waiting for the national dialogue to guide them in terms of closing the borders, fighting corruption, dealing with the issue of civic delivery across the countries. That is my frustration. Okay. I agree that there are certain items that they must force under the national dialogue, but others it is indication of a failed state. Because these black politicians, they use the position for themselves to enrich themselves rather than servicing the black people of South Africa, the majority of South Africans. Okay, all right.
Mulanda, you see interesting points because this is what it comes down to. Does this, if we have a dialogue that plays out over 6 to 9 months, does it mean that government programs are not running? I mean, that's the ultimate question, that surely a system still need to be in place to keep things afloat and to hold criminals account and such, even as this dialogue continues, and that the dialogue perhaps is to improve on what needs to be worked on. But I'll give that to our panel to respond to on the other side of this short break. Do stay with us. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. Well, we continue to reflect on really what was seen in the National Convention that played out on Friday and Saturday at UNISA in Pretoria. The outcomes, we know that a steering committee set to be set up within the next 2 weeks. In the meantime, though, how are South Africans reflecting on the outcomes of that convention? And has it built some confidence in the process leading up to that national dialogue? Taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584. In fact, let's take a look at some of the WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers at this hour. One that says, good Newzroom Afrika, good evening, Osnaledi, Bongani Tibi here, President of the Gauteng Community Forum. We were there, we really need such dialogue, very important, even though some people are negative about it. So, okay, thanks. Bongani, thank you so much for sending in that message. Anonymous says, good evening, Naledi. South Africans need to introspect, to stop the blame game and be part of the conversation. Okay, Anonymous, thank you so much for that message. And Madika says, good evening, all national dialogue may go on, but the public already knows 80% of the problems through Auditor General's yearly reports and commissions, as well as inquiry reports, other evidence reports of crimes, etc., which are not resolved. Not to wait for 12 months for a national discussions. All right, that's some of the views coming in. I want to bring you in here, Mr. Ditlek. Of course, this is the chairperson for the National Convention Organising Committee. Lots of questions coming your way, and for the past week or so, it has been a lot of, I suppose, a lot of discourse and some frustrated sort of perspective coming from South Africans. You hear, for instance, Mr. Masuka says the community of persons with disabilities were not adequately represented, and he says you've got, for instance, the eminent persons group and this outgoing Miss South Africa, Mia Leroux. He says, yes, but that's representation and not activists that can speak particularly to what it is that the community needs. I wonder what you make of that. Molanta in Kempton Park says, well, top of mind for him as he watches this is government incompetence and, what this really does to deal with that. What happens at the end of it? And if you let me stack, again, there was the issue of the deputy president of the convention, causing some frustration inside the convention in the sense that, well, is government listening when the deputy president can walk out in the middle of an event that is said to be so crucial for our country? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. We must remember that the main objective of the national dialogue is to create a pathway for South Africans to dialogue. Not only to dialogue, but to clearly redefine the problems as they see them, but to also come up with solutions. This is unprecedented. And its success, by and large, is going to be dependent on how South African citizens, both individually and organized, seize up the moment, defend and protect this process. Now, there are some of the critical issues. You'll recall that when some pulled out, we said in that 7 days, let us take this process to the citizens. Let us remove it from the boardroom. Let us take the debates and the concern raised by those who pulled out. Let South Africans redefine them. And that's what we did. And we believe that it was not going to be perfect. As I said, the imperfection was extremely authentic. That's what you saw on the ground. But also with respect to representation, people with disability were in the room. However, we understood, remember that there were more than 31 sectors being identified and represented in the forum. And during these discussions, because everything which was presented there, including some framework documents, they were not conclusive. We said that this forum, this convention needs to review them, strengthen them, and they will continuously be strengthened at this cascade down to the ward level, to the communities. Therefore, there was nothing presented as a fait accompli in the conference. The sectors in the conference itself were extremely expanded. You'll remember we had a full session where we went through that framework, and within the sectors, some sub-sectors were constructed. And that process will be published to the nation in the coming 2 weeks as we finalize the steering committee. We understand that frustrations runs high and distrust. At the same time, we cannot predetermine. Let us define this process. The convention was to lay the foundation and open the process to the nation, which I believe it was successfully done, with all its imperfection. And we accepted those that were identified as the people with disability. And it was expanded because all the sectors in that room were asked to go out, and those who were not accommodated in any sector, they remained in the conference room, and they clarified which sectors they belong to. They were reconstituted as sectors. That is the nature of this process, and I think if we hold that spirit, the space was held by civil society, not the government. We accept that there can continuously be a contestation, but it is how the citizens are organized, which is going to determine the success. This process is not going to stall the responsibility of government. It continues to undertake its constitutional responsibility and obligations. Part of this process, the EPG, as you indicate, they play their part as an oversight to see and support and ensure that the things are responded to. They play their critical role as well leading to. There is also interministerial committee, which, among other things, beside the representation of government, like any other sector, they don't have any special authority in this process. Their responsibility, among others, is to ensure that when critical issues emerges during this process, the government is able to respond on the spot. And finally, and I think sometimes we react to issues. When the deputy president went out, I specifically debriefed the deputy president in the morning to say there are certain challenges, like the Khoisan people. listeners will recall that there was also a protest at the gate, which I went out to check. They were largely Khoisan people. And I have asked the Deputy President and the day before the Minister of Kokta, please assist with this issue because it looks like it's an issue embedded in the governance system. And that's what the Deputy President went out to meet with the Khoisan people. He was not working out. That I can badge because I have requested it. That is why he came back. He was not gone. He went into another room to meet with them. And I think it is very important for all of us that in this process, we allow objectivity to guide us.
Yeah. So this is the thing, and Dineo, I want to bring you in because the argument could easily be made that while there is so much contestation, I saw earlier as Thagani was talking about whether or not there was sufficient consultation even over the topics that are covered in the convention that need to be looked at in the dialogue. I saw you nodding there a little bit. And the argument now could easily be made that, well, it is in fact in raising these frustrations that you actually are having the dialogue, that is what is about, that is what it's actually about people being in the room to say this is the blind spot and it needs to be looked at right now. Do you know, does that give some optimism?
To be honest, I would say that as much as, especially in my part where we as activists of gender-based violence, I feel like such topics were overlooked. As much as, yes, they were there as part of the themes and everything, but like Ndate has mentioned, there were things that were not given that much attention to.
Like what?
And
yes.
I'm going to be honest, it was there as gender-based violence. We were grouped in themes and sections where we were supposed to discuss these things. But then my point is, we as NGOs, we have to go back to the communities that we are representing and we must come back with feedback. Okay, we are being heard. But the other thing is, and that's my argument still, that we're coming back and then we're giving this report, we're giving this feedback, but what is the implementation? We can have these discussions, but if there's not going to be any progress, I mean, gender-based violence is the highest number of women and children and victims actually of South Africans that are being abducted and living in fear. It's not being addressed. These are the things that we should, I feel like there are the core conversations also that should be looked into. So yes, the conversation was there. Yes, we were part of the theme, but I bring back nothing but or no report of what would the plan be there after the discussion. That is my point.
Yeah, and the reality perhaps for people on the ground that you go and report back to not having changed. But let's hear some calls. Lindile in Matatiele. Lindile, good evening.
How are you, my sister? Good evening, my sister.
Good evening. Thank you for calling. Talk to us.
My sister is speaking to Lindile at Matati.
Yes.
My sister, I'm coming a second time in the SAPS. I come in to respond to the national dialogue.
Yes.
I'm sorry if I'm out of the line. President Ramaphosa is failing us in the South Africa. I think, my sister, as you, as the one of our national journalists to give us information in my judgment. My sister, before the starting of the day one in the national dialogue, you passing our views and our concern concerning the South Africans.
Yes.
We're saying, President Ramaphosa, if you are the true president of this country, how can say you spend 800 million to know our challenges in this South Africa? As the president of the ANC, you are elected. In this country, one, you want peace in this country. Two, you want opportunity of our brothers and sisters. Three, you want honest of our members of the president, ministers, and you want to know what is the delivery according you promised us before you come as the president. You said when you are the president, Ramaphosa, Tumamina, you still have our files in your pocket or in your office.
All right. Okay, Lindile, yeah, I think you can, yeah, I'm going to leave it there because I think your point is quite made. And what I do want to do is when we come back, let's clarify this issue around the costs, not just of the convention, but of the dialogue. And of course, we do have other sectors that are joining us via video link, what it is that they want to see moving forward. So let's talk about what is next after this. I'll come back. So we continue to reflect on the outcomes of the National Convention and what is next for the team. We know that we have been told that a steering committee is to be set up in the next 2 weeks. And of course, modalities really on how the dialogue is going to play out over a 6 to 9 month period. Big questions around what this is costing the taxpayer, and we'll clarify some of that as well. But we're taking perhaps one more call, 01059461010. Temba's calling in Pretoria. Temba, good evening. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling in. Talk to us.
Good. I'm calling in relation to the conversation that you are having with the gentleman.
Sure.
Right? Whereby whatever this particular dialogue is intending to achieve, they're basically regurgitating what has already been discussed in the past. And I'm basing my argument on what we have done in the Planning Commission. Mm-hmm. I was a commissioner for the National Planning Commission for 5.5 years. And in that 5.5 years, we basically assessed the implementation of the NDP. And out of that, we even made a recommendation before we exited the system to the current president, right, to say that, Mr. President, this is our findings in terms of the assessment of the NDP. Starting with chapter 3, which deals with the economy, all right, up to chapter 15, because we've got different areas.
Okay.
Right, chapter 3 is only the economy, chapter 4 is infrastructure. Basically, what I'm saying is that certain recommendations have been made to the president on all the chapters. What the president should have done is to test whether these recommendations are, can they be, implemented, yes or no.
Yeah, okay.
Not to come and regurgitate issues that this guy, your guest is now trying to say that we are trying to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's nothing that we are trying to do.
All right, Temba, that point is made. Temba in Pretoria is saying we're regurgitating points that have been made by the National Planning Commission as they looked at really what's coming out of the National Development Plan, for instance, in this dialogue process. But I do need to move towards wrapping it up. And just as we go around the room, I do want to go to our guests online. Anzio, I mean, your thoughts to South Africans and certainly what needs to happen next. So ideally, we've got a steering committee that will be set up in the next 2 weeks, but what is it that needs to be prioritized as we get closer and closer to seeing that dialogue taking place?
I mean, I think something that's quite apparent is South Africans are insisting on rapid response, and the frustrations that are being shared by the callers and the frustrations even by the panelists that this is not happening fast enough. Inclusion needs to happen now, and that inclusion needs to be authentic. And I think that our fellow panelist is saying something that is true. If not everybody can come to the room, then this is not a true national dialogue process. But I think when we start to deploy rapid responses, if the interministerial team, as it's intended to do, starts deploying rapid response, if we are able to get people to have short-term solutions, quick wins, that's the way that we'll really start to build trust with South Africa again. We are operating in a trust deficit. We know this already. We also know the people's frustrations. I don't think that was ever the point of having these national dialogues, nor of the National Convention. But I mean, if Yana can go out into their communities and activate national dialogues and ensure that their voices are lifted into the process. If Blind SA could do the same and others respond to that clarion call, we are no longer reliant on mechanisms that have previously failed us. We take back the power of the people. We, the people, shall govern South Africa. And indeed, it's time for us to take up that mandate as ordinary South Africans and say enough is enough. Okay. If this process is going to follow through, it's going to need to follow through with transparency and rapid response at all times.
Yeah. And Mr. Masuka, just ideally what needs to be prioritized moving forward, particularly for your constituency that you really want to see representation for?
No, firstly, let me say I agree with the utterances made by the chairperson to say the purpose of a dialogue is to create a pathway for South Africans to have a dialogue. But we must be cautious not to rush the process, because otherwise we'll compromise quality. So a dialogue is not done to tick the box. It must have a meaningful impact. So what needs to happen going forward? The disability sector must be consulted to get their own, to decide on their own representation that will represent the sector in the steering committee. The organizing committee must not choose the representatives for the disability community. We have the capacity to elect our own representative, and it must be comprehended as such. Yes, it is true, in this national convention over the last 2 days, there were a number of persons with disabilities. But what we need to understand is that there was no accessibility, particularly when it comes to information. The online information was not accessible by persons who are blind and partially sighted. And how do you expect a fair participation of that community when information was not accessible? Even there was a high level of generalizing issues when we were in the commissions. I remember I was participating in the commission on education. So the facilitators there were entangling us to generalize issues. And we cannot proceed progressively if we generalize issues we are not specific. Remember, issues of persons with disabilities must be treated in a very sensitive way and be allocated to those with an understanding on how to tackle issues of persons with disabilities. That's the only way in which we can be inclusive in this program of a national dialogue. Let us have a fair process and let us not rush a process. If it means that we delay, we need to delay so that we have a quality national dialogue.
Yeah, and nobody feels left behind. I think that is incredibly important. Mr. Ditlhake, I'm going to let you have final thoughts here. The issue, of course, being raised around costs, and let's clarify that at this point, right? What we know about costs. I mean, there's an understanding that we might be looking at 450 million rand price tag in relation to this dialogue. Just your understanding of what that number crunching does look like, and then just final steps on what we expect to see moving forward.
Thank you very much. There was never 800 million rand, and I was part also of the preparatory task team before. There was never 800 million rand. There is a broad budget as we speak, broadly been strengthened, and remember, for that budget to be finalized, it will only be done as we learn with the rollout of the national dialogue, because there will be a number of differences. There will be self-convening in addition to that structured conversations which are going to take place. And therefore, you cannot be definite. The principle that is being used is that the government will contribute 60% of the cost of the national dialogue process in its entirety. The other 40% will be contributed by South Africans, from business, ordinary citizens, and so on. What will happen, because the practical question is that this convening committee now will have to account up until to the time of the convention. And we are busy preparing a report, which we will hand over to both in terms of what happened, but also in terms of what caused expenditure will be handed over to the new steering committee. In that sense, what will be happening in the coming months, in the coming, let's say, 2 weeks, because that's where our mandate ends. We will be producing that report in detail. We will be constituting the steering committee. But also, we are consolidating the lessons learned, as my colleague from the disability saying. It was never perfect, but it created the baseline for South Africans to reconstitute and prepare themselves to participate in this. We are also refining the tools which were approved by the convention. But these tools and methodologies will be adaptable. But the conversation, the dialogue has begun. all the sectors in the whole have committed themselves to kickstart the conversations. They will go through their sectoral constituencies and so on. Our responsibility at this point in time is to ensure that those are captured, that the voices being amplified are respected, and the outcomes actually find themselves in the final document as we go to the last convention. This dialogue, and I agree with colleagues, is going to take 6 to 7 months before it's concluded. And as South Africans, we'll have to review and evaluate to what extent have we been covered the space and all South Africans by that time. And we'll have to make a decision as we go along.
Okay.
Finally, I want to make an appeal to South Africans. And I know many people are saying we have gone through this journey before. We have not. We have not undertaken an exercise of this nature rooted in communities, including the national planning document. We are doing something that we are testing. It may redefine the governance and the manner in which we are doing things in South Africa, as long as we are committed to make it work for this country and the generations to come.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much to Our Lady Dineo Sibaka as well, and Zia Jacob, who is part of the National Dialogue's Civil Society Caucus. Dineo Sibaka is, of course, with You Are Not Alone Foundation. Takane Masuka, who is Vice President for Blind SA, and in studio with us, Mr. Boitshoko Ditlhage, who is the National Convention's Organising Committee Chairperson. Keep the thoughts coming in, though, via X at Newzroom 405. We take a short break. We do have your headlines on the other side of this.